we will now begin the feedback session to hear the key takeaways from each of the breakout rooms. We'll go by sections. So we'll start with the arts session. And so I will invite Emily to share from their group what they talked about.
Hi, everyone. So yeah, I was moderating one of the arts breakout sessions, and the kind of three things that stood out to me that we talked about were barriers to networking and connections. So not just with peers and with potential collaborators, but also with maybe promoters or labels or editors, or depending on what discipline you're working in, people that you would need to know in that field and that now there are barriers to creating relationships with. We also talked a lot about just experience, and experience can already be this kind of self-fulfilling thing where if you don't have it, you can't get it. But now it's even more difficult to practice performing, for example, or have experience in the arts that can help you build confidence to know that this is what you want to pursue. So if you can't kind of experiment with it, then how do you know that you're making the right choice to say study it or pursue it in those ways? And we just kind of talked about the sort of looming sense of precarity in a field that is already known for being precarious. So again, how do you make the confident decision to pursue the arts if A, you can't get the experience needed to know what that actually will look like, and B, you don't know if there will be funding, if there will be opportunities. So with COVID-19, this kind of looming sense that it can be, there's more pressure than ever to stick with something that is more reputable for being secure than the arts often are. But we also talked a lot about the arts as this, we talked about the arts and artists as people who are creative and that aren't going anywhere, and that this will always be a need. And so there's some optimism there as well. And we talked about, being gentle with yourself. And so Quincy shared some great tips around that. I think that was kind of the gist of it, unless anyone else wants to share anything that stuck out to them, but that was kind of what I got.
Perfect. That sounds great. Thank you so much. And now I'll invite Celine to share what we talked about in our group.
Great. Okay. Thank you, Sam. So we had a similar kind of discussion. It sounds like some of the same things were raised, particularly this conversation around how COVID has created some barriers to building community within the arts and culture sector. This inability to come together. One of the things that did come out, there were some suggestions of where you could go to have some of your questions answered or to do some of this networking. Elan was raised as a really great resource, which many people here probably already know. There were also some questions around how artists can sustain themselves financially during this period. This is a challenge again with the precarity and things like that. So we talked a little bit about where young people trying to enter into this sector can go to kind of look. Again, Elan. We had a representative from Heritage Canada who flagged that there are funding opportunities and programs available to artists, and that we should check them out. We had the benefit of having Quincy right at the outset of our session, so that was great. He elaborated a little bit on his remarks earlier to the full group. He talked a little bit about how this time is being used by a lot of artists, creatives, both in the theater, but also people who do music and on TV as kind of this time to invest and adapt to this new reality that we're facing. But also that there was a sense of optimism as well. That one of the things that Quincy mentioned was that during the pandemic, people were turning to the arts. There was this sort of this sense that this was what was going to get us through. That there was this real sense that arts were important, music, theater, television, all of these things, and so that there was this optimism that this is something worth pursuing. So just a few things that came out of our session.
Thank you, Celine. And now I'll invite the health folks.
Hi, I'm not the health guy, though. I put my hand up earlier. We were the vocational ed group.
The vocational ed. We can start with you then, yeah.
Okay. Well, then
Thank
I'll
you.
just review some of the themes that sort of came up as we discussed vocational education. One thing that was stated several times by Juan Carlos and Alessandra is the fact that there's a persistent bias against vocational education that has changed over time, but is still there. It is seen as lesser than to the regular high school diploma, and of course lesser than higher education at CEGEP and college levels. So that is something they spoke about a lot as problematic, something that needs to be addressed. There is, to some degree, perhaps a greater bias in the English-speaking community in Quebec against vocational education as opposed to the French-speaking community. And there's also a rural-urban split, with rural people being more inclined to pursue vocational education than urban people. There's another dimension of vocational education that's worth noting, is that it's sometimes seen by immigrants as a fast track to citizenship, which is a positive thing, except that a lot of those immigrants don't end up ultimately working in the fields that they've studied, and instead end up leaving, for instance, Quebec to go to Toronto. So there's not really that much benefit from the point of view of the labor pool in Quebec. It's also seen as something that native-born or immigrants can get into if they lack sufficient French skills to work in other fields in Quebec, or if they lack Quebec and Canadian experience. It's a way to get into the job market fairly directly. They gave a list of some of the popular fields, which I will get to you right now. The popular fields right now are things like welding. Whoops, no, that's the long little list I have. I will find that I'll find the popular fields in a second. To counteract the bias, one thing that is needed is promotion of the vocational education, in particular education of young people about the sorts of lifestyle it can lead to, including the amount of money that people can make as welders and electricians and plumbers and so forth, and the versatility that is available to people with these skills, including being able to go work anywhere in Canada if they get the appropriate certification. People need to know that getting into one of these fields is not a trap. They're not going to be pigeonholed for the rest of their life, but there are several sorts of paths that people can take. So in general, the promotion is needed in order to counter the bias that exists. One of the things that's happening in Quebec is that there's a labor shortage, and therefore there's a lot of work for people. And because of that, there's been a decrease in the number of students pursuing vocational education. It's to the point that people in Quebec, employers are going abroad to get skilled workers like welders from Latin America and so forth. Another idea that came up is the possibility of linkages between CEGEP technical programs and vocational programs at high school, so that students could qualify in their vocation, begin working, and with the money, the gainful employment they have, be able to pursue CEGEP educations in fields like restauration or engineering technologies. So that's about it. I now have the list of the popular fields right now that were noted, and that is beauty care, automotive work, metallurgical work, health services, especially in the COVID context, electrotechnology, woodworking, and furniture were some of the fields that were noted. Perfect. So that more or less sums it up.
Sounds great. Sounds like it was a lot of good work and a lot of good conversations that occurred in the room. We can move on to the health section to hear what y'all talked about.
Thank you. So in the health sector, we had a pretty interesting conversation. One of the things I think that stood out mostly, of course, as a barrier in the health sector is the need for credentials as well as education. And of course, the higher up the ladder you want to go, from nurse to nurse practitioner to a doctor, various levels of specialty, is you need higher levels of education, and that takes time, resources, and the question of access. That's obviously one of the big things. The second thing that we've talked about in a general sense was of course, the impact of COVID, which obviously has both an immediate and a long-term effect. And very much the discussion was around the whole question of remote access and distance delivery and talking to your doctor over Zoom, right? It's a new world. And of course, there is both the pluses and the minuses of those situations of adapting to it, as well as the whole aspect of being able to teach in a subject which traditionally has been done hands-on and face-to-face, and from now on is not going to be done that way as it was done in the past. So those were, I think, sort of the two big things. One of the couple of items that came out of the discussion, the questions, really related to the profession. You know, is it one of, in the context of COVID, one of last resort? That, you know, people don't want to work in there for obvious reasons, and so other people will take that job just because, or, you know, is it something, a career opportunity that can be molded and fashioned? And again, there was both sides of the coin. But it seems that given the situation and the need to be prepared for future pandemics, that there are going to be incentives in the system throughout to get people to stay in there, that there are going to be more permanent positions, which I think is something very specific to Quebec, where we've had this noted trend towards agencies. And of course, to join in recently the announcement by the federal government that it was going to put standards in across the country for the federal dollars that go into healthcare. So there's a lot of things coming up in the sector that are going to act as I guess, make it more of a career opportunity if we can get it right, hopefully. And there was also a very interesting discussion, I thought, from Khan, who described himself as a minority within a minority within a minority with, sorry, Khan, I forget how many you said, but he's practicing in a field that is psychology, both in various different aspects. He's a Black person, and he's also a male, which is not commonly found. And so if the struggles that he's had to deal with and the recognition and whether he's an appropriate person and that kind of thing, but I think it was a good personal story as a reflection on the particular circumstances you find yourself in as an individual. And I think the message there is that you have to go through that and sort it out. And in his case, it's been kind of a niche as well. So now there's a demand for having different people, and particularly with to deal with different clientele. And so he used the word sadly, but you know, he's there, and it's good that he's able to respond to, say, young Black men who were struggling with their position and the effects of COVID and so on and so forth. So I thought it was a very interesting personal reflection on focusing on the person's particular circumstance. So I think that covers the ground pretty much.
Perfect. Thank you so much. That sounds great. We'll invite the tech folks to tell us how their room went.
So in our session, we talked about the career path of the person that was guiding our discussion, and shows how a lot of people, when they get involved in tech, that's not necessarily where everyone starts off, and you don't need to come out of university right away and go into tech. It could be something that you eventually evolve into. We also talked about how to get started in the sense of startups. So it kind of combined a bit of startup prep with networking talks, and which both of them are really important for starting up and for your career. When you go ahead and start a startup, it's really important that you're going ahead and getting feedback from a lot of different people that are working within the field of what you're planning on your startup being centered around, as well as when you're going ahead and looking for positions. It's also very essential that you're going and having those kind of warm conversations where you come in and say hi, I would like to use some of your time to talk to you about either an idea or about myself. We also looked at LinkedIn profiles, as LinkedIn is like a really important platform for people like within this field particularly. So we like looked at how to amplify our LinkedIn, and how it should be structured for like maximal reach, especially since based on LinkedIn's algorithms, there's certain keywords that you or like you should be like taking advantage of keywords for like when people are doing searches, because there's like some things that all of us use on our LinkedIn which are not really important because it won't pop up in the algorithm anyways. And we also talked a bit about the difference between like our dream careers and like what we're gonna have to do like for right now, because as much as people would probably like to hold off and say like I'm gonna wait until I get that dream job, like we're in a pandemic, so it's probably good for you to go for like what you find is interesting, and maybe like the position might not be necessarily interesting, but if the actual like company itself is interesting, you may have a way to eventually get into what you want to. Whereas, like if you just hold off and say, no, I'm going to wait until I get the specific job from the specific place, you may be waiting for a while, especially right now.
Wow, amazing. Sounds like that was a very, very insightful conversations that you all had.
I have a question actually, because I see we're very ahead of time. What can educational or training institutions do to help, you know, future students, current students? Maybe you don't know, or maybe you have ideas how they could make you feel. If you are a youth, how could the institution or place you're at help you feel more ready for you know, this COVID reality? Like, is there anything that has been done or is going to do? So I just, yeah, if anyone has any comments on that, I'd love to see. You can raise your hands, discuss.
Happy to jump in, Anna. Thanks.
Great, thank you.
Of course. I mean, it is in many ways the hardest time of our lives to apply for a job. And yet I think it presents opportunities specifically online that others have mentioned, and which we can be taking advantage of, which groups like this honestly are ideal for. I think that many on this call who are, for instance, based in Quebec are lucky because you're in a situation where there are many social supports and there is a relatively tight-knit community full of individuals who are willing to help. And yet at the same time, it takes a bit of precociousness. It takes the actual reaching out to individuals who you might not otherwise have connected with online in ways where you both explain why you're connecting with them and offer some value to them, ideally in that outreach, excuse me. And I gave the example of explaining exactly how one can do so without putting a lot of pressure on the other party from whom you're perhaps asking for an introduction. So if in the real world, coffee chats are the ultimate way to get a job, 80% of people get jobs based on their network. Unfortunately, it should be all based on skills-based hiring, but practically we still live in a world that is mostly referral-based. And as such, what I'd highly recommend is that you reach out to as many individuals who you think are relevant to potential jobs as possible, doing so with the following template. 1, this is why I'm reaching out to you. 2, here's somebody else that I'd like to be connected to. This is why. 3, here is literally the introduction written out for you. And then finally, if you don't, for instance, want to make that introduction for any reason, no problem. Is there any other information about them that would be helpful for me? And again, if that is an inconvenience, no problem. Thank you so much for getting here. And that model where you're making it really easy for somebody else to make a warm introduction for you or not, and thereby maintain the relationship with them as well, is again what I'd recommend for most networking, whether on LinkedIn or elsewhere.
Thank you. So do you feel that do you feel from seeing like the people who are applying for jobs or maybe contacting you, are they adequately prepared by educational institutions, do you think, for that aspect? Or is there things maybe that could be done to help them? And maybe, you know, in Quebec or elsewhere?
Yeah, no, it's a fantastic question, Anna. So have a particular background in the subject that Anna just asked about. I run higher education systems for LinkedIn Learning across North America, and I've worked with most of Canada's post-secondaries on career development and skills-focused teaching. So again, it's an area that I know quite well. And I went to McGill. I was born in Gatineau. Quebec is my home. The answer in short is that you're right, post-secondaries are not preparing students, unfortunately, in most cases sufficiently. And I feel bad for those who I know are on this call coming from post-secondaries. I specifically created a software development bootcamp that's operating in Montreal and 6 cities across Canada because of the lack of specifically bootcamp-like education in the post-secondary space, where you're learning the skills that are specifically in demand for jobs at that given moment. The more broad aspect of career development that is often served by career services is actually, I think, quite adept at specific institutions in Quebec. I mean, I think actually Concordia is a fantastic model for an institution that has a really solid career services group. But unfortunately, even they, like in most post-secondaries, struggle to have the career services education infused in the rest of students' post-secondary experience. So every class should have a combination of the learning to learn, the higher level learning. Say you're in a class on rhetoric as part of a philosophy program, the faculty member should also be explaining that rhetoric equals communications, right? To use a LinkedIn Learning example, we always show Oprah talking about communications, and that way the student knows what they've been doing the whole time is actually really relevant to a variety of careers that relate to argument, communications, negotiation, etc. It's those concrete skills that need to be infused throughout. And for those on this call who are students who are looking for jobs, another recommendation is to try to identify in your past experience what skills are most relevant to future potential jobs. The last example I'll give, because I know there are some newcomers on this call, is from the world of refugees. My favorite example of refugee experiences is, say you're shepherding a family across multiple borders over 3 to 5 years and therefore have a gap on your LinkedIn profile or resume for that period of time. I would fill it in explaining that you were incredibly resilient. You were doing project management with the 3 kids and 2 parents, that you were again getting across all of these difficult and often dangerous situations, that you learned to manage bureaucracies and weave your way through them, etc., etc.
I see that Celeste had her hand up. So you're unmuted, Celeste.
Mm-hmm. I would say, like, for us, I think at least, I'm not sure if it's like across post-doctor post-secondary, but I feel like the school kind of like boxes us in. They have like an assumption of what our career path is going to be and give us very little opportunities outside of that. For example, like one of the things that they always suggest students do is co-op. And yeah, you go ahead and do co-op, and it's supposed to give you experience for your career. But specifically within my department, they never give us opportunities outside of research. And a lot of us are not interested in being in university until we're 45. So they don't give us very many opportunities that give us like viable like opportunities to not do that. And like every time I go and speak to my department and say, hey, did you know there's other things outside of research? They act astonished and like, oh yeah, I forgot that some people want to feed their family one day. So it would, I guess for that, I just feel like it's not leaving us very many options for like a COVID times, because most research facilities that we would even end up going to after we graduate require in-person things anyway. So a lot of our job positions are being postponed, and the only thing that we can do is industry right now. And we're not equipped. We don't have any form of proof that we know how to do anything besides do pen and paper math. And I just feel like it's putting us at like this amazing disadvantage on the career market. And we have to kind of like do all the supplementary skills searching ourselves, where I feel like it should be already integrated into our program.
Okay, thank you, Celeste, for sharing that.
Hi again. Okay, thank you. We had only a very small number of youth participants in our group, and so I was wondering if I could take this opportunity to invite the young people that are on the call in this plenary session to comment on one thing in particular, which is about vocational education, which was the topic that we were talking about in our breakout room. I was just wondering, if anybody could answer the following. When did you become aware of vocational education and training during the course of your own education? Who brought it up with you? When did you become aware that that was a path that you might be able to follow, or that maybe someone in your family had followed in the past, or a friend? What were thoughts around that conversation?
We got a comment from Celeste. So she says that she's always known about it, but it was very stigmatized in my household. I'm just going to give the we could pass the virtual mic to Doug Brown, who I believe had his hand up as well.
I just have a question following up or a topic maybe that people will want to say something about or not. Following up on some comments that Jake made about boot camp and with regard to things, I guess, like I think you were talking about computers and so on. Just for your information, I'm the Dean of Technology Programs at John Abbott, and we're just starting to open up a coding boot camp sort of thing. But one of the things we've learned looking at our programs, trying to see what we have available for students, is we have far more programs that are attractive to young women than we do to young men. So we have dental hygiene, almost all young women, biopharma, almost all young women, nursing, and the only two programs we have where it's principally young men are computer science and engineering technology. So I don't know if Jake or maybe Juan Carlos Quintana have anything to say about how vocational education splits or is relevant to male-female differences. And by the way, in terms of academic achievement, this male-female issue can cut across minority groups in very significant ways. So you have very great differences in academic achievement and graduation between females in a population and males. Anyway, that's a big topic, and I just wonder if anyone has anything to say about it with regard to vocational education.
It's a great question, and I think it ties into the broader issue of vocational education being stigmatized, as the poll I expect will reflect. Many governments around the world right now are actively trying to remove that stigma. So as an example, in Ontario, there's an advertising campaign that's been on TV and that will be re-released shortly, and that in part I recommended to the government, which primarily is trying to explain to students, to young people, that the trades are not only a place where you can make more money than in many other professions, but also are incredibly creative and satisfy many other aspects of what people are looking for in jobs. There are communities around them. They're highly in demand. I think the greatest labor shortage is really across the country and maybe across the developed world right now. We're all in vocational fields. So if you want to get a job, it's a great place to go to actually start one's career and perhaps finish it. The gender question that Doug raised is particularly unusual in the sense that I think most vocational trades or vocational programs are actually geared towards men more than women. So John Abbott might be a bit exceptional in the way that you're describing, you know, vet, dentistry, et cetera, programs that are more common for women. But I think that John Abbott and governments and post-secondaries more generally can do a better job of explaining that being the minority in this case can actually be helpful. So for instance, being a male applying for a veterinary program will often result in more spots open for you. Being a visible minority applying for a program, particularly these days, will actually result in your having a greater chance at getting the jobs than a white man like me, as they should be. But there is not sufficient awareness of that, certainly not coming from the education programs that you just described.
I wonder if at the high school level things are any different, Juan Carlos or anyone.
I guess I would make the divide between you know, the hard trades like construction oriented and metallurgy and auto mechanics, and the health and helping vocational programs. You know, by health and helping, I am of course including nursing, you know, dental hygienist, you know, secretarial and all those trades. And there's even a program to try to attract females to the what I refer to as the hard trades. It's called Chapeau les Filles. You know, it's a program that was instituted by the government of Quebec to try to encourage females to go into the construction trades, you know, and welding and all that. So the divide is there. I guess that's when a vocational training center has what I would describe as a balance offer between hard and not hard trades. There's a more balanced body of students, right? We do see the same divide, particularly at Riverside. We have a lot more health-oriented vocational trades as opposed to perhaps English Montreal or Lester B. Pearson. It has more of a balanced body, and so we do see it as well as you do, Doug, at John Abbott. There's more females that are coming to our programs. Less and less so also for the health because of the need, right? So, people will go into those trades to try to get a job.
I just hearing the discussion. So my wife is a ballet teacher, and one of her students who's been in the class since a very young kid, and you can imagine the ballet teacher. Anyway, she's gone into mechanics as a voc ed student. So that's quite a switch from being a ballet student, ballet dancer, to being a mechanic. But aside from the fact that you obviously would have to have some inclination around mechanics, which is neither male nor female necessarily, but of course the perception that this is for the boys in the garage. Anyway, there is a demand for female mechanics because they have fine motor skills and their hands are smaller. They can get into little places that big brawny guys who are on the wrenches can't do. So it's just interesting to try and think about that in a different context, that there are opportunities for people who maybe don't fit the standard perception of any profession or any trade that you might have. So I think the question, the essential point is just don't assume, but go and dig in and take a look. And how do we get people to sort of ferret through all the different kinds of opportunities so that they can find out what suits them, regardless of whether they are a male or female?
I love that comment from Hugh, and I think that there are many, many examples on both sides, right? That we need more male healthcare workers, just like we need more female mechanics. We need more people of color involved in tech, just like we need more white people involved in social services. And the interesting thing about that transition actually relates to what I said earlier about skills-based hiring. So if we can actually start hiring people based on a combination of their inclinations and their skills instead of their skin color or who they know, then I think the economy as a whole, society as a whole, will function better. And my three favorite examples of that from the pandemic, even in some cases from before the pandemic, are data on people transitioning from one area to another based on those skills. So for instance, we have a ton of Syrian newcomers in Canada, and the preponderance of government-sponsored newcomers are bricklayers. We don't need a lot of bricklayers in Canada right now, but bricklayers have a lot of skills that are highly in demand. As an example, delivery workers have a huge overlap in terms of their skills to bricklayers, and we need a ton of delivery workers right now. A more playful example comes from bartenders who, for instance, are really good 911 call center responders. And we need a lot of call center responders right now. They're really good at managing chaos and talking to lots of people at once and being in stressful circumstances. Another great transition. The last example I'll give comes from the world of retail, and specifically even fast food restaurants, where one of the largest international chains had to shut down most of their in-person dine-in operations around the world. But what they were really smart about was making use of the skills that all of those people that used to be serving hamburgers had in their back pocket. So for instance, when they wanted to make posters explaining the new COVID rules, they just sent a message to all of those former workers and said, who has graphic design skills? Who has printing skills? Who can help with X or Y, and repurpose significant portions of their population to new tasks, much in the way that I think folks on this call could think creatively about what the skills that they've had in the past could be, how they could be applied to new circumstances during COVID.
Such great insights. I'm so glad that we have all these voices here to discuss today. I do have a question from Lorraine-O'Donnell.
Hi, everybody. I'm following this discussion with a lot of interest, and something that has long occurred to me. I'm one of those 45 years in university people. Why do we need to split between arts and tech, between arts and vocational? It seems to me the bias against, I'm lucky I came from a family with no bias against trades. However, I saw it around me. why could people not do, and I'm not being facetious, why could they not do mechanics and poetry? What is the technical or other reason that is not possible?
So I think on my end, it has a lot to do with me being like a person of color. Since I am basically checking off all of the boxes, my parents made it very clear that like even my degree as like a physics student, my parents think that even that's not good enough for getting a job. So when I was in high school trying to figure out things, like when I was initially kind of interested in psychology, when I was interested in creative writing, my parents are like, no, like, one, we're not paying for that. Two, like, you're not going to be able to pay for it. And I think especially within the people of color community, there's a strong emphasis on like every generation doing better. And like, as both of my parents are first generation immigrants, like the idea that I may, if I follow what I found initially interesting when I was younger, if that were to put me at a lower point socially than my parents, then they would have felt like they failed. That, and along with the side that my brother is handicapped, I'm the only one that's going to be able to have a career. So I guess there was even extra pressure on me. So I never even occurred in my mind for more than like 2 minutes that, like, you know, I could do a career that I just wake up every day and I find it's fun. Like, that wasn't really an option. I'm not sure what other people were thinking, but like, even during my even during my time in undergrad, all of my electives have always been just more skills. Like, I never took things like creative writing or a poli-sci class or a fine arts class. All of it was coding, marketing, finance, just more skills. So that's kind of my standpoint.
Thank you for that, Celeste. And we just got a comment from Caleb, who said he completely agrees and echoes Celeste's comments. I don't know if, sorry to put you on the spot, Caleb, but would you like to say anything more about it?
She brought up something that was very interesting. It's the whole immigrant kids, especially kids whose parents were not born in a country other than Canada, come to Canada and they raise their kids here. They always do always drive or hone in the message that here's a couple examples. So in the Ghanaian community, the careers that are often driven to us to pursue are law, medicine, engineering, or finance. There's nothing else if you dare to deviate from any of those paths, then you might as well not show up to go home. You might as well not be home, right? So understandably for me, when I decided to take a social science path, my parents were understandably upset, but it's all about, at least for me, I don't know if other people share a similar experience. At least for me, I had to stand up to my parents and tell them, I'm not doing this to necessarily make money. I'm doing this because that is what I'm happy. Like, I want to do things that makes a difference in other people's lives without necessarily trying to profit off of it. And that's and exactly like what Celeste said, immigrant families have this notion of not only being the breadwinner, but doing more than what your parents or your grandparents had because of their limited opportunities. So you have to take advantage of whatever is given to you.
Thanks so much, Caleb. I think we only have a few minutes for only one more comment. We'll unmute Samantha. I see you have your hand raised.
Yeah, well, I kind of just want to echo what Celeste and Caleb both said. I mean, I'm in the health sector, but I'm also from a family of immigrants. And luckily for me, my choice to go into medicine was truly purely the product of my own interest. But I know that, for example, my sister, when I was younger, she's a great singer and she always dreamed of becoming a famous singer. but that was completely discouraged, and her dreams were shot down by my parents, and not because they think that being a singer is a bad career or anything like that, but it's just because they come from a country where it's in order to succeed in society, you really have to rely on your brains. The only reason my parents even made it to Canada as immigrants is because they were at the top of their class. They were able to get scholarships to come here and to pursue studies here. So in their mind and in their mentality, it's like they're only, you can only rely on those traditionally respected careers, and things that are more like in the arts or even some vocational careers are just less respected. And I think it really just has to do with the context that they're coming from. So it's unfortunate, but I also think that hopefully with our generation, those of us who were born here, who grew up in Canadian society, we have a better understanding of the fact that it's possible to succeed in different career opportunities, and also you can be a nurse and you can also be a singer, on your days off. So hopefully it's going to change with the next generations.
I will just unmute John, Miss John from Y4Y. He just had a quick thing to say to all of us.
Okay, yeah, thanks. I'll be really quick. I appreciate you guys letting me do that. Oh, let me just say, firstly, it's always reassuring to see young people engaged and communing like this, discussing the issues that affect us, many of which were addressed today. So thank you for hosting, and I'm sure it's been really valuable for all the young people in attendance. I did want to just promote our podcast really quickly. It's not completely self-serving, as one of the themes of the podcast is employment and networking, which is clearly a concern, especially lately. The podcast is about young English speakers in Quebec, you guys, and we wanted to unite the communities by exploring ESQ life across the province and talking about the issues that we face as a community, like employment. So we wanted to hear from you guys. Many ways to get involved. So send us an email at podcast@y4yquebec.org if you're interested. If you have interesting stories about being English in Quebec, or you're a local artist, definitely give us a shout, because we'd love to interview you, hear your story, and share your music or artwork. So if you'd just like to support, follow us on socials to stay in the loop and listen to our latest episode. So we're releasing the teaser this week. We're very excited. Check that out. Send us your feedback. Anything is welcome. We want to hear from you. That's all. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Celine Cooper is here. Celine from the Consortium of English-speaking colleges, CEGEPS, and Universities of Quebec. She and also the consortium also was one of our funders. Big thank you for them. We appreciate your support. Celine, would you be ready to say a few words now?
With pleasure. Thank you, Anna. And I wanted to start by congratulating the organizers of this event, QUESCREN, BCRC, and Y4Y. What an incredible forum. I learned so much. I have pages and pages of notes, so I've really enjoyed participating. Again, my name is Celine Cooper. I'm the Managing Director for the Consortium of English-language CEGEPS Colleges and Universities of Quebec. This is a brand new alliance of 9 post-secondary institutional leaders in Quebec. So we're made up of Bishop's University, Champlain College, Concordia University, Dawson College, Heritage College, John Abbott College, Marianopolis College, McGill University, and Vanier College. So we really are in the process of becoming. This is an initiative that was made possible by a contribution from the Secrétariat for Relations with English-speaking Quebecers, and Lise Jensen, who is here representing the Secrétariat. Just wanted to say hello and thank you. And the consortium is also operating with the support of Bishop's University. So I wanted to just give you a little bit of a sense of how we came into being. Again, we're really new. We will be having kind of a more formal launch in mid-November. But the creation of this consortium was really spurred by the need to address the ongoing exodus of young English-speaking graduates from their home province of Quebec. As many of you know, English-speaking Quebecers are more likely to leave their home province to relocate to other provinces across Canada or elsewhere in search of employment opportunities. So this tendency presents challenges both for the vitality of English-speaking communities here in Quebec, and for Quebec society as a whole. So Quebec invests all this money and energy into educating these young talented people, and then they leave. So it's a shame because Quebec doesn't always get to benefit from the knowledge and talent that you have. So as we talked about today, the COVID-19 pandemic has really deepened those challenges. It's accelerated a lot of those challenges to the nature of work and society, both here in Quebec and around the globe. So our consortium is mandated to build research capacity related to the employment and retention and success of graduates from our institutions here in Quebec, and to address the needs of our graduates in a way that mitigates the push factors contributing to their exodus from Quebec, notably among English-speaking Quebecers. The vision of the consortium is to be an innovative, collaborative, and durable interinstitutional leadership structure for Quebec's English-speaking CEGEPS colleges and universities. We are committed to and capable of building pathways to rewarding employment in career domains for our graduates in the province. And I just wanted to say this last session, particularly the comments from Celeste and Jacob, or Celeste, Jake, and Caleb. I was really interested in what you had to say, and so I would encourage all of you, everybody attending, to please get in touch. I will post. You can connect with me on LinkedIn, and I'll post my email address as well. There will be a website available for the consortium in the coming weeks. It's still under construction. But as we get things up and running, I am very interested in connecting with you and hearing more of what you have to say. So again, thank you so much to the organizers for a great forum, lots of really interesting stuff going on, and I look forward to working with you as we go forward.
Thanks so much, Celine. And I realized, sorry if I did not see you before, we do have the Secrétariat la relation avec les Québécois d'expression anglaise here.
Hi, my name is Annalise Jensen, and I'm here representing the Secretariat for Relations with English-speaking Quebecers. Unfortunately, I have to step in for Mr. Skeet, so I hope you won't be too disappointed. At the Secretariat, we recently signed an agreement with Youth for Youth to help them with their core funding so that they can keep on reaching out to youth across the province of Quebec and help them engage in different activities and develop their sense of attachment to Quebec society, the province in which they're born. We at the Secretariat recently, it feels like ages ago now with the pandemic, but last fall had a series of consultations where we heard from English-speaking Quebecers and youth about low levels of attachment, kind of feeling unwelcome. And we realized that there was really a need for connectedness amongst young English-speaking Quebecers. And that's why we're very thrilled to announce this agreement with Youth for Youth.
Thanks so much, Annalise. Right, I think that might be it for now. What it is, we have 1 minute left, and I'm aware everyone, it's a Sunday and the weather's not too bad yet, so people might be wanting to going out to celebrate. Just want to say thank you all for everyone who was able to join. And I would just like to say a big thank you to the organizing of organizations, so for QUESCREN, who I work for, BCRC, Y4Y, and also CEDEC, who gave us a workshop on Thursday. And I think for me, that's everything. I don't know if my co-host Sam would like to say a few words.
No, thank you so much, everyone who attended, the moderators, note takers, everyone it's been a big community project. So thank you, everyone who's been able to help us get it out.